Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We are reading Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, first canto, chapter 16, verse 21. Arakṣyamana striya urvibalan shochasyato purushadar ivartan vacham divim brahmakule kukarman ya brahmanye raja kule kulagyan arakṣyamana striya urvibalan shochasyato purushadar ivartan vacham devim brahma kule kukarman ya brahmanye raja kule kulagyan. Translation. Are you feeling compunction for the unhappy women and children who are left forlorn by unscrupulous persons? Or are you unhappy because the goddess of learning is being handled by brahmanas addicted to acts against the principles of religion? Or are you sorry to see that the brahmanas have taken shelter of administrative families that do not respect Brahminical culture? Purport. In the age of Kali, the women and the children, along with the brahmanas and cows, will be grossly neglected and left unprotected. In this age, illicit connection with women will render many women and children uncared for. Circumstantially, the women will try to become independent of the protection of men, and marriage will be performed as a matter of formal agreement between man and woman. In most cases, the children will not be taken care of properly. The brahmanas are traditionally intelligent men, and thus they will be able to pick up modern education to the topmost rank. But as far as moral and religious principles are concerned, they shall be the most fallen. Education and bad character go ill together, but such things will run parallel. The administrative heads as a class will condemn the tenets of Vedic wisdom and will prefer to conduct a so-called secular state, and the so-called educated brahmanas will be purchased by such unscrupulous administrators. Even a philosopher and writer of many books on religious principles may also accept an exalted post in a government which denies all the moral codes of the Shastras. The brahmanas are specifically restricted from accepting such service, but in this age they will not only accept service, but they will do so even if it is of the meanest quality. These are some of the symptoms of the Kali age, which are harmful to the general welfare of human society. Om Ajnana Timirantasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Śrīmate Bhakti-vedanta Swamini Namane. Namaste Sarasvate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatardine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Reading the translation again. Are you feeling compunction for the unhappy women and children who are left forlorn by unscrupulous persons? Or are you unhappy because the goddess of learning is being handled by brahmanas addicted to acts against the principles of religion? Or are you sorry to see that the brahmanas have taken shelter of administrative families that do not respect Brahminical culture? So here we see Dharma in the form of a bull continuing his inquiry to Mother Earth, Bhumi, who has taken the form of a cow. And we are about to see Maharaj Pariksha come upon the scene. And this chapter is in many ways kind of setting the scene for the age of Kali, the age that we are currently in. Not the age of Kali, as in Durga, but Kali, as in this demoniac person who we're going to encounter attacking Dharma in a few verses. So here Dharma is inquiring after coming across Bhumi, wandering the earth in the form of a cow, obviously feeling forlorn, grieving. And Dharma sees her grieving and then approached her to find out why. And he is doing so by asking all kinds of questions as to what the reason for her grief might be. Now, can anyone remember where we have seen a series of questions like this before in the Bhagavatam? It's just recently. Yeah, Yudhishthira and Arjuna. Yeah, exactly. So we saw this a couple chapters ago when Arjuna was, well, first of all, Maharaja Yudhishthira had kind of a monologue of asking questions similar to these to himself when he observed so many bad omens going on in the earth as he was waiting for Arjuna to return from Dvarka. And then when Arjuna did return from Dvarka, Arjuna was pale, he was crying, he was obviously experiencing so many symptoms of distress, obviously very distressed by something. And Maharaj Yudhishthira asked a whole series of questions presenting every single possible reason why Arjuna might be upset in that situation, culminating in the question, is it so that Kṛṣṇa has disappeared and this is why you are mourning? And we will find the same thing in regard to Dharma, that in a few verses, after presenting many lesser reasons for Bhumi's distress, Dharma will finally present, is it because Kṛṣṇa, who blessed you by placing his feet upon you and enacting your pastimes on the earth, has now left? Is that why you're grieving? So there are a few other parts of the Bhagavatam in which we see similar questioning, besides the case of Yudhishthira and Arjuna. We're going to see in the third canto that Vidura will pose similar questions to Uddhava as they, Vidura is returning from pilgrimage to Hastinapur, and Uddhava is leaving Dvarka to go to the north, to go to Bhadrakashram. And they run into each other, and Vidura notes that Uddhava is feeling very distressed. And so he poses a similar long series of questions as to why Uddhava might be upset, again culminating in the question, has Kṛṣṇa disappeared? Actually, Vidura already knew that Kṛṣṇa had disappeared, but the acharyas say that he was asking partially to receive some personal kind of psychological clarity or closure in the situation. Later on in this chapter, we're going to see Maharaj Pariksha posing a similar series of questions to Dharma when he comes upon Dharma being abused by Kali. Maharaj Pariksha is going to ask Dharma, who was the cause of this situation that you are now experiencing? Even though Maharaj Pariksha will see clearly before him that Kali is abusing him, Dharma in the form of a bull. But still, he asks a whole series of questions as to all the possible reasons for Dharma's lamentation and suffering. We also see in the case of Akrura's arrival in Vrindavan in the 10th canto, he was sent by Kamsa to Vrindavan to retrieve Kṛṣṇa and Balaram and bring them for the wrestling match and his own demise, Kamsa's own demise. And when Akrura arrives in Vrindavan, then he's first received by Kṛṣṇa and Balaram, who then take him to the house of Nanda Maharaj. And Nanda Maharaj asks a whole series of questions about the welfare of Akrura and the welfare of Akrura's friends and relatives in Mathura. So we actually see different forms of this kind of questioning all over the Bhagavatam. And I've been reading the Uddhava-gītā recently in the 11th canto, and I've especially noted that Uddhava asks his questions to Kṛṣṇa in a similar way. Kṛṣṇa will present a certain philosophical point, and then Uddhava doesn't just ask, well, what about this? Although there's one section of the Uddhava-gītā where he asks a lot of what about ifs, out of ecstatic love for Kṛṣṇa and impending separation. But generally, when Uddhava asks questions, he offers a basis for the question. He frames the question around higher philosophical principles, and in this way he gives context for the question itself, and he gives context for his own understanding of the subject matter, which then allows Kṛṣṇa, of course Kṛṣṇa doesn't need to be allowed to do anything, he's independent, but it creates a situation in which Kṛṣṇa can respond in a way that builds upon what Uddhava has already understood, or exactly what it is that Uddhava is questioning. And we see the same sort of thing going on here with Dharma towards Bhumi, that Dharma isn't just asking some kind of whimsical, thoughtless question. It's not just going up to Bhumi and being like, oh, what's wrong? Instead, he's showing thoughtfulness by his inquiry into what the cause might be. So there's some establishment of mutual understanding of the situation of the earth. There's also an expression of relationship between Dharma and Bhumi, that there's a caring nature to the relationship, that Dharma is approaching Bhumi with a caring and thoughtful attitude. And then this is going to allow Bhumi to then give a very thorough answer as to what the calamities and lamentation she's experiencing are. And also notably, Dharma isn't making any assumption as to what the answer is. He's giving her all room to answer thoroughly. Dharma's not mansplaining. He's giving all kinds of opportunities for Bhumi to give a very thorough and meaningful and heartfelt answer. So, as I said previously, this kind of thoughtful inquiry achieves two purposes. It is both demonstrates the relationship between the person making the inquiry and the person receiving the inquiry, and it establishes a basis for the conversation to be built upon. And this then allows for deeper discussion to take place. When it comes to our own inquiries to saintly people, especially to our spiritual masters, it is very useful to follow this kind of format of inquiry, to not just throw out random bits and pieces of information or bits and pieces of thought or inquiry, but rather to be thoughtful in how we frame our inquiries, thoughtful about what is it that is motivating us to think and question in the way that we are, and to show what is our understanding of the subject matter that we are inquiring about, and also demonstrate our willingness to be receptive to the answer that we are hoping to be given. And in this way, very meaningful conversations can go on between the shishya and the guru, the disciple and the spiritual master. So in this verse, Dharma, the first possibility that Dharma brings up for Bhumi's lamentation is unhappiness at women and children being left uncared for by unscrupulous men or cannibals, potentially. As Prabhupada in his lecture that he gave in Hawaii on this verse, he spoke quite a bit about cannibals. So there might be something to that. Maybe by some translation it does mean cannibals. So Dharma is inquiring, is Bhumi lamenting because she is unhappy at seeing women and children being left uncared for and unprotected by unscrupulous men? And in this way, Dharma and also Bhumi are demonstrating a very essential nature of a saintly person, particularly the nature of a devotee. And that is that a devotee is para-duḥkha-duḥkhī. That means that a devotee suffers at the suffering condition of others. So a saintly person does not just look at the suffering of others, doesn't see the conditioned soul's suffering in material life, and just take a stoic stance that, I'm situated in my own spiritual understanding. I'm happy in devotional service to Kṛṣṇa. So who cares? That's not the mood of a devotee, especially not the mood of a devotee following in the mood of Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu and his associates, such as Lord Nityananda. The mood of a devotee is actually that the devotee feels pained at heart at seeing conditioned souls suffering, at seeing religious principles being neglected, and at seeing the ills of ungodly societies. The devotee feels pain at this and wants to do something about the situation. And Kṛṣṇa himself brings this point up in Bhagavad-gītā in terms of his own reason for appearing on the earth. Kṛṣṇa says in Bhagavad-gītā chapter 4, verses 7 and 8, very famous verses, says, Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyutanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya chadushkritam dharma samsthapanartaya sambhavami yuge yuge. He says, whenever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice, O descendant of Bharata, and a prominent rise of irreligion, at that time I myself descend to deliver the pious and to annihilate the miscreants, as well as to reestablish the principles of religion. I myself appear millennium after millennium. So Kṛṣṇa is demonstrating in these verses his concern for the well-being of the jivas within this world. He comes into this world to set things in order so that the saintly souls within this world are happy, and so that the conditioned souls are given all facilities for approaching him, both approaching him gradually through Vedic Dharma, and also approaching him immediately through Sarva Dharman Prityaja Mamekam Sharanam Vraja, through abandonment of all other lesser religious principles and just fully surrendering to Kṛṣṇa. So if this is the nature of Kṛṣṇa, and we jivas are part and parcel of Kṛṣṇa, the same quality but in minute quantity, then we can understand that it is also the nature of the pure soul to have concern for the well-being of others and to want to take action, even to want to insert themselves into situations that are outside the scope of their immediate comfort or enjoyment, for the benefit of others. Just like Kṛṣṇa, he could just be in the spiritual world with his eternal associates and experience unlimited enjoyment. But Kṛṣṇa decides to come to the earth for the benefit of others. Of course, Kṛṣṇa doesn't suffer when he does that. But nevertheless, the point stands that he takes on this this duty of acting for the welfare of others. And in Caitanya-bhāgavata, we also see this in the case of the Vaiṣṇavas of Navadvip. Before the appearance of Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu, the Vaiṣṇavas observed that because the people of Navadvip were blinded by material opulence, they were completely distracted by all kinds of materialistic engagements. People were engaging in very pompous weddings and religious ceremonies. They were even performing wedding ceremonies for their pets. It kind of reminds me of like the housewives of Beverly Hills or something, like the Kardashians. So they were engaged in these over the top materialistic rituals and celebrations. They were engaged in speculative learning, the cultivation of jnana. They were engaged in logic and grammar. In fact, Navadvip was known as the capital of logic and grammar. And even when the pundits of Navadvip would speak on the Bhagavatam and Bhagavad-gītā, somehow they would speak about these shastras, but not speak at all about devotional service. They wouldn't touch a single bit about devotional service, even when speaking on the Bhagavatam. I don't even know how that's possible, but somehow they would achieve that. And it's described that when the Vaishnavas of Navadvip saw the state of Navadvip and saw the state of the world as a whole, afflicted by Kali Yuga, then the Vaishnavas, they cried on behalf of the materialists, because the materialists were not able to cry on their own behalf. Therefore, the devotees cried on their behalf for their benefit. So on a very practical level, we can see that the state of the world is just like what Dharma is describing, that people are being taken advantage of left and right. And as Prabhupada often said, rather than modern human culture teaching people how to control their senses and how to engage their senses and activities according to religious principles for human upliftment, instead, human beings are being taught in modern society to simply live like cats and dogs. And what does this mean? It means that people are being taught to simply engage in the acts of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending without any concept of higher principles, without any concept of hearing from higher authorities, without any concept of a higher purpose to life. In fact, they say YOLO as their motto. You only live once. So therefore, just do whatever you want to, because you're going to die anyways. So this is a very hedonistic way of living. And this especially afflicts the people who are being mentioned in this particular verse, the women, the children, and the brahmanas. In Vedic culture, or the culture that is described by Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, it is the duty of society to protect the women, to protect the children, and to protect the brahmanas. All protection is meant to be given to these different groups of people. But instead, what do we see in modern culture? Instead, children are raised without any positive role models to look up to. Instead, they have these celebrities placed in front of them that glorify illicit behavior, even write songs about engaging in illicit sexual behavior as children. Like Cardi B, there's one song I came across where she's singing about being in high school and engaging in all kinds of really animalistic behavior. And then kids hear these things and they see these role models, and then it's no wonder why kids end up engaging in similar behavior. And then what does that result in? It results in unwanted children. If the children are born, then they are born into a situation in which they have parents who are not able to properly care for them, not a stable household, parents who are not able to give them the time to care for them. So many problems end up in foster care system. I had a friend who spent much of her childhood and adolescence in the foster care system. It was absolutely a horrible situation for her. She experienced so much abuse and neglect in that situation. And then also adults are also, even if they are adults, they bring their kids into unstable household situations. And then, they get divorced because the adults weren't thoughtful and dutiful in their approaching of marriage. And the kids end up having to go between parents. They watch their parents take on different potential partners. There's no steady situation for the kids, no proper guidance. Then the kids and parents end up on almost an equal level, right? The children are feeling lusty desires and they're seeking after fulfillment of those lusty desires. And then they see their parents engaging in the very same behavior. So in this way, the whole dynamic of the children being under the care and under the guidance of the adults becomes completely corrupted. And there's no steadiness in the kids raising over their childhood. And then they reach adulthood and they have so many psychological problems. They have so many attachment issues. It becomes this vicious cycle. I've experienced this personally in case my older brother who married a very crazy woman. And then this created complete havoc for their two children. The two children are constantly going between different household situations. The mother is still going between all these different partners and is abusive towards these partners and abusive towards the kids. And then, I can't imagine what the outcome is going to be for these children. So it's very sad that this is the situation that people are brought up in. But this is the direct result of the modern philosophy of our society, which is that personal satisfaction comes from practicing less self-restraint, having less restrictions on how you live your life and your activities, and that every person should simply determine life's principles for themselves rather than seeking higher guidance. And the modern idea is that there will be world peace if everyone just simply follows this approach to life. But Krishna's picture in the Bhagavad-gītā is very different. In the second chapter, verses 62 to 64, Krishna says that while contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them, and from such attachment, lust develops, and from lust, anger arises. From anger, complete delusion arises, and from delusion, bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost, and when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. But a person free from all attachment and aversion, and able to control his senses through regulative principles of freedom, can obtain the complete mercy of the Lord. So this is the very opposite picture of what the value system is, or how to go about life in a wholesome and uplifting way, that one should voluntarily take on conditions of and principles of self-restraint and restriction. One should cultivate detachment. One should be averse from engaging in activities that will take one away from Krishna's service. and one should have an attachment to and longing for activities of devotional service. And in this way, one can become uplifted. But this upliftment is very much hinging on the existence of higher guidance. And this guidance is meant to come from the Brahmanas. But as Dharma points out in this verse, the Brahmanas are also corrupted in this age of Kali. Rather than the Brahmanas normally are supposed to not have to work for a salary, but rather the Brahmanas simply engage in their prescribed duties, and they're cared for by society in the form of charity. And then this charity is reciprocated by the Brahmanas through their engaging in teaching others Vedic knowledge, performing sacrifices for the benefit of others, and their distribution of the charity they receive for the benefit of all people. In this way, there's meant to be a reciprocal relationship between the Brahmanas and society as a whole. And in this way, the Brahmanas are able to uplift themselves, and the people in general are also able to be uplifted. But instead, what happens, as Dharma pointed out, is that the Brahminical class in modern times has become implicated in sinful activities, has become caught up in partiality towards ill-motivated people, and then their ability to both act for their own benefit and for the benefit of others is compromised. And no one gets higher principles, no one gets guidance as to how to go about their lives. The Brahmanas themselves are not acting according to higher principles, and thus they're not able to properly represent knowledge, what to speak of representing principles of religion. And thus, not only is society as a whole subject to denigration, but the Brahmanas receive the highest level of sinful reactions for their sinful behavior, as described in the 5th canto of the Bhagavatam. There's a very long description of all the really horrible sinful reactions that someone would receive for all these different kinds of acts. And our acharyas explain that the particular reactions which are being described are specifically for the Brahmanas. If someone is of a lower status, then they still, and they're in the human form of life, they still do get reactions for engaging in sinful activities. But because they have a lower standard of knowledge, therefore the reaction is not as strong. But for someone who is a Brahmana, they are held to the highest standard of their activities, and therefore they receive the highest level of sinful reactions for engaging in illicit behaviors. Now, what is the central thread that runs through all these questions that Dharma is posing in this verse and also the verses before and after this one? The central thread that is running through these questions by Dharma to Bhumi is genuine concern for the welfare of others individually and also the welfare of the world collectively. Beyond any criticism of the world in general, which we may notice, the overriding quality which we aspiring devotees who are trying to follow in the footsteps of Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu should cultivate is a sense of care and compassion for others. It's easy to read verses like this or read so many purports by Srila Prabhupada and get into a sort of us versus them mentality as aspiring devotees. We might think that we have all the knowledge, we know what the standard of human life is, and just look at these degraded people. They're just a bunch of animals, and practically we can just spit on them, even not, if not literally, but in terms of our attitude towards them. So it's very easy for an aspiring devotee to get caught up in this kind of a mentality, and we've seen many examples of this. But this is not the mood of a follower of Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu. Instead, as Radhanath Swami pointed out just a week ago here in this room, we should try to orient our vision towards the soul, we should try to orient our vision towards understanding that every single living entity that we see in this world is a jiva, a part and parcel of Kṛṣṇa. And every one of these jivas is suffering in material life, although by nature the jiva is eternal, full of knowledge, and full of happiness. And why are they suffering in this way? It's because the misguided people of this world are trying so hard to be happy. They're trying so hard to fulfill the nature of the soul, but they take up all the wrong methods for achieving this. And in doing so, they end up crashing and clashing into each other and creating for themselves and each other all kinds of calamities and pain. And we see practically the state of the world is very much characterized by calamities and pain and misguidance. But as Radhanath Swami pointed out, Kṛṣṇa is still within the heart of every single one of these wandering conditioned souls. And Kṛṣṇa is the true source of solace that everyone is looking for. And so if we can be of assistance to these conditioned souls by giving them guidance, by showing them an alternative, by helping these jivas come to Kṛṣṇa, and also helping ourselves come to Kṛṣṇa, we can be compassionate towards ourselves as well, then that will be the greatest benefit both for ourselves and also for everyone who we encounter. And this is the only real solution to the world's problems. All other problems of material adjustment stand on shaky ground. And actually, I'm just now reading in Bhagavatam, Canto 11, which chapter is it? Chapter 21. Kṛṣṇa gives a very detailed description of piety and impiety on the material level. But then the ultimate conclusion that Kṛṣṇa makes is that all these conceptions of material piety and impiety, and purity and impurity, are completely relative. So in modern society, people are noticing this, that the values of what is right, what is moral, what is pure or impure, these are all relative considerations. So because people don't understand the higher principle, the thread that runs through all these lower principles of advancing towards Kṛṣṇa and remembering Kṛṣṇa, then they end up disregarding these lower principles and thus become degraded. However, we find in the Garuda Purana a verse which Radhanath Swami also quoted a week ago during the initiation ceremonies at ISV. The verse is, Apavitra pravitro va sarva vastam gatopi va yasmaret pundarikaksham sabahya bhyantara shuchihi. That whether one is in an impure or a pure state, whatever condition of life one is in, one who remembers the lotus-eyed Lord, Kṛṣṇa, becomes cleansed both internally and externally. So this is the ultimate solution to the problems of the world. And the most pure and direct means of remembering the lotus-eyed Lord and advancing towards Kṛṣṇa and becoming situated in devotional service is the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And so we should very seriously and sincerely take up this chanting and try to find clever and newer ways by which we can induce others to chant Hare Krishna. And that inducement can take all kinds of forms and methods. And as Prabhupada said, this mission of sharing Krishna with others is a long process that takes much practice and consideration, but it is the ultimate solution to life. So if there are any questions or comments or complaints, we'll take them now. Or reflections.
Video is still on, right? Yeah, they are there.
I think so.
say something about this Bacha Devi, the goddess of learning, being in the hands of people with bad character?
So Devamrta Maharaj often talks about this principle that knowledge is specific to a particular state of consciousness. It's not, as people tend to think in modern society, that just by my intellectual prowess I can understand any subject, but rather you have to have a certain kind of state of mind in order to understand and apply knowledge correctly. So that is very specifically why the Brahmanas are held to higher standards of conduct, that the Brahmanas are meant to be representatives of learning. They're meant to be representatives of the goddess of learning. They are meant to represent the Shastras. And so in order for them to be able to represent the Shastras, they have to be holding themselves to the highest level of conduct. Otherwise, they become implicated in so many different vested interests and aren't able to apply knowledge for the benefit of others. And we see practically, like the development of AI in modern times, that this is, by all reasonable calculations, going to drive human society into the ground and just open the door for so much more calamity. And yet it is this unstoppable force because there's no higher guidance. So the Brahmanas are sold out to these administrators who simply want their own benefit and don't have any conception of the benefit of others. So I don't know if that, in a very brief way, answers your question, or if there was more you wanted to add.
It's interesting that Prabhupada acknowledges in the purport that the Brahmanas are going in Kali Yuga, they're going to be very good at all those things. But it's not the same as studying religion and philosophy.
Yeah. And we see also one very prominent example, Sigmund Freud is considered one of the most brilliant psychologists ever, but he was absolutely addicted to sex and drugs. And so then he came up with all kinds of crazy ideas that were influenced by the contaminated state of his consciousness. Like, for instance, thinking that all boys grow up to be sexually attracted to their mother.
George Freud, right?
Yes. Yeah. Obviously that's not a very reasonable outlook. But because his mind was contaminated by his sinful proclivities, therefore he came up with such an idea. So this is the risk of having a society of Brahmanas that aren't engaged in proper conduct and don't have proper character. It reminds me also, I don't know if any of you have seen the movie Bruce Almighty. We see the example of Bruce. He's this guy who has no good character, and then all of a sudden he is endowed with all the potencies of God. And immediately, what does he do? Even though the reason why he was praying to God initially in the movie was because he was saying that, oh, God isn't acting for the benefit of others. I'm experiencing so much suffering, so therefore God must not be doing his job very well. Otherwise, he would be doing good for others. But then he gets in that position, and immediately he's engaged in all kinds of selfish and sinful activities.
I haven't seen that movie.
Probably best not described in a Bhagavatam class, all of what he did. But he engaged in a lot of lusty activities. Yeah, a lot of lusty activities. But you can watch the movie yourself if you would like. yeah, so even though he saw the higher principle, God should be acting for the benefit of others, but then he was not able to act for the benefit of others because he wasn't of proper character.
But then he changed.
Yeah, he eventually changed by God's arrangement. But even that was a very superficial change, in my opinion. Okay, any other questions or comments or concerns? Did any of you, Daniel or Monica?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. It was a fantastic class. I feel like it really helped me to open my heart to the bigger, the macro, see things. I feel like I had a lot of compassion. I felt a lot of compassion toward on the individual level people, but I don't think that it really was thinking so much macro, the collective. So yeah, I really appreciate your going into real deep detail about what is the state in Kali Yuga, in today's world of what the children are learning through the media and how they're affected and how their family life and this vicious cycle goes on. I really appreciate you going deeply into that and help me reflect and to reorient my vision towards the macro, from the micro level.
Hare Krishna.
I have one question, Sukhi sister. So when you spoke on the willingness to be receptive of listening to the answers from Guru, so the conversation can be meaningful. So I was reflecting on this. What if they trigger you? How do you not get triggered by their answers? Because sometimes we might not be in that state where we can understand what they are saying. Also, like the Sigmund Freud example on the psychologist, it was so, we have to read that in nursing school, and it was so disturbing for me to even read it loud, because I sense it, what do you mean the baby boy is attracted to mother and the baby girl is attracted to father sexually? That's so disturbing, right? And now you said it's first time I heard from somebody who is also not okay with that. I didn't talk to anybody about that, and in that kind of things, it triggers sometimes. And how do you know your guru, who to follow and who to not?
Well, in terms of being triggered by the answer of a guru, I've experienced this myself, that there were times when I was a brahmachari where I was not in the proper headspace and I asked very challenging questions at the end of a Bhagavatam class. But actually my reasoning for asking the question was not that I was really looking for the answer, but more that I was just not in a good headspace. And so there was one time in particular, I asked a question like that, and then the head brahmachari, Ananda Tirtha Maharaj, he came a year or two ago. He chastised me and he said, instead of using your intelligence to not understand Kṛṣṇa consciousness, why don't you try using your intelligence to understand Kṛṣṇa consciousness? And I was felt like I had just been punched in the face. I was absolutely reeling. I didn't even hear the answer that he gave to my question. So he did answer my question after that. But I it was like I'd been punched in the face and was just seeing, the birds around me, in the cartoons. And so I, immediately after he answered my question, then I went outside and I was all angry. But then by Krishna's mercy, I had a moment of introspection and thought, I have two options here, that either I can try and understand why did Ananda Tirtha Maharaj respond to my question in this way, or I can just be angry about his answer and then I will not be benefited by it, and actually I will be impeded in my progression in devotional service by not trying to properly understand what his message was. And so I decided in that moment that I was going to try to understand why he answered me in that way, and even if that meant facing myself in a vulnerable way. And so then I sat down by myself and I thought about what was it that motivated my question, what was his answer, what motivated me to react in the way that I did, what were the personal attachments that were at play in my reaction to his answer. And then I was able to resolve the tension that had come up in my mind from that, and I was able to appreciate the answer that he gave. So when it comes to interactions with our mentors and spiritual master, we might also have such things happen, but if we have enough humility to take the position of that, I am in need of guidance, have so many faults, and my spiritual master, I've taken shelter of them because I'm convinced that they have knowledge and guide and realization and experience by which they can guide me forward, then we can step back from our immediate reactions and benefit, even if we don't immediately see the underlying reality that's being spoken on.
Thank you so much. That's really wonderful explanation. Thank you. I have a piggyback question on that.
Okay.
So that is in terms of the trigger part, and in terms of this psychosexual description by Sigmund Freud, like sometimes we get triggered, but sometimes we just think that it's because they're this writer, they're this psychologist. We just have to take those readings, So I did not talk about that with anybody, and my friends also might have felt discomfort, but they also did not talk about anybody. And all this life until now, we are like, now that I have heard from you, and like, oh yeah, I was right. I just kept it to myself. I read it, and and those kind of how do we know the things we are reading is not good and is actually speak up?
Well, I mean, first of all, the vital importance is to have higher guidance, which we can compare the things that we hear against. Cultivate knowledge of Shastra, try to apply that in our own lives so we can develop realization. Pray to Kṛṣṇa for purification of our consciousness, so that we can understand and integrate what we hear. Pray to the spiritual master, ask questions. And then I think that there is value when we encounter such things of speaking up and, Kṛṣṇa says in Bhagavad-gītā that there's a way of speaking, which is in the mode of goodness, which means that you're speaking to truth, you're speaking in a way that's pleasing, is well received by the audience. I think there's some other factors that I'm forgetting. But so we can follow all these while also not just accepting bad ideas. We can give a soft or even a strong opposition to such bad ideas. But then we should also be willing to accept if simply the person or persons or setting is not the right setting for bringing up such things or having proper discussion about such things. So it takes some learning discretion and how to approach it best given each situation. But yeah, it's not so that we have to just listen. It could also just be that we talk to another devotee about it, and then we're able to find some solace from that.
Thank you, sister. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. Alright, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai, Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.